If you've ever lost marks because you couldn't explain a literary term, this tutorial is for you, because today I will teach you the key literary terms that every student must know. Hi everyone, welcome to Heshbon Academy. So today we'll be taking for the first time Literature in English, and today's topic will be Introduction to Literary Terms. First of all, we go to defining what literature is. So literature as a subject of study is an imaginative invention. It's a creative work of art produced by a poet or a dramatist or a novelist. It's popularly known as a mirror of life, as it is the use of diction, plot, character and setting to give an expression to life. In order to illustrate what I mean by literature as a mirror of life, if you look at the picture, you will see that coming out of a book is a mirror that shows different human relations, people going about their business. One of the biggest or best expressions to life is literature. You can see their lives play out by the pages of these books. And so let's move on. So you can't really talk about the meaning of literature without talking about diction, plot and setting. Now, what is diction? Diction is a choice of words that is used in either a poem, a play or a prose. So diction is a choice of words used. For example, maybe I want to write a book that is centered on Mushin area of Lagos in Nigeria. So Mushin area of Lagos, Nigeria is a ghetto kind of area. So if I want to write a story about that place, I most likely have pidgin English there as part of my diction. So literally speaking, what I'm saying is that the choice of words used helps us see the expression that the author wants us to see. For example, if you look at the picture on the left hand side, you see someone that looks like William Shakespeare, trying to pick out words. And if there's one thing I know about Shakespeare is that he knows how to craft realities with words. So plot is different. Plot is how the story moves from stage A to stage B. For example, in that story, Miriam moves from Lagos State, Nigeria to Abia State, Eastern Nigeria. So as I'm writing that story, there will be movements. So how the story moves and helps us to see how Miriam accelerates from one part of the state to another part, of the country. Shows what the movement of the story is all about. Now, plot is different from setting. For example, I am situated in Lagos, Nigeria. Many of you, my students, can be situated in many other parts of the world. That part of the world where you are staying in, that is your setting. If you look at your life from a story point of view or from a writing point of view, do you understand? So setting is that environment, is that background of the story. So moving on, there are three genres of literature. We have prose, we have poetry, and we have drama. So we'll look at this one after the other. So what are the elements of prose, or I would like to say definition of prose? So the term prose is derived from the Latin word prosus, which means continuous or straight on. It is written language in its usual form, and it is a piece of writing that is continuous to the very end. You don't pick up a novel and expect a novel to end in 2 pages, except it's a short story. Even a short story might not be as short. It's prose because it's continuous. Prose is a literary piece expressed in ordinary and straightforward language, other than in verse. Now, why they say other than in verse is because poetry is known to have complicated kind of languages. Poetry has verses, poetry has like complicated, complex language. But it's not the same as prose, because prose is ordinary. Prose is straightforward language. If I'm a French person and I want to write a novel in French, I would write it in my everyday language, although refined grammar, refined punctuation and all of those things, but it will be in a language that is not too convoluted like the way poetry is. A perfect example of prose is a novel, which is defined as long prose narrative with a wide range of characters and experiences. So this just defines what a novel is. There are two kinds, or primarily two kinds of prose. We have tragedy and we have comedy. Now, what is a tragedy? Now, people believe that tragedy is when something ends badly. You get, when I say, oh, that's so tragic, that's like the adjective. We are many times we make that mistake. So tragedy in prose is quite different. In a tragedy, the most important character, that is the hero, has a lot of good qualities which makes him loved and greatly admired, but he has some flaws in his character, a kind of noticeable weakness in his behavior which causes his downfall and failure. This downfall either brings him into serious crisis or it makes him lose his life or influence. Tragedy is not just when a story ends badly. It's when the most important character, when the hero, who has a lot of good qualities, who is greatly admired by all of the characters in the novel, when he has some flaws, and then that flaw, that when you say flaws are like glitches in behavior, bad habits, bad characteristics. He is admired by people, but he has some dents in his character. Do you get? And that dent in his character is a weakness in his behavior, and that specific dent is what causes his downfall and failure. So this downfall, the effect of this downfall is that it brings him into serious crisis, or it makes him to lose his life or his influence. So at the end of the day, he ends sad, not because of anything other than the fact that the hero has a flaw, like a glitch in his behavior, a dent in his character, and that specific dent, because it is unattended to, he refused to work on it, or he's oblivious that he has that dent, causes him to either lose his life, to fall into serious crisis, or to lose his influence. For example, Othello by William Shakespeare is a perfect example. Othello fails because of his jealousy, and he lost his life because of that weakness. If you've read Othello by William Shakespeare, you will know that Othello, was schemed by Iago and got jealous of Cassio. He thought Cassio was, having an affair with his wife Desdemona, and because he was green-eyed, when somebody's green-eyed, he was jealous. Iago was able to use that against him and caused his downfall. He dies at the end of it. So number 2 is comedy. In a comedy, characters are amusing and the story ends happily. So comedy is what you know comedy as. It's when the characters are amusing and the story ends happily. So, but the thing is, there's another third category called tragicomedy. Now, bear in mind that it's not tragic comedy, it's tragicomedy. TRAGI-COMEDY. So when there is a mixture of both tragedy and comedy, to result to a confluence of tragedy and comedy called tragicomedy. Let's move on to the next thing. Plot. Now, plot is known as the movement of the story. Like I said before, it is the arrangement of events in a work of art. It is the train of connected events through a play or a novel. It is an arrangement of multiple events in a way that one event leads to another. A good plot must possess a single, complete, and ordered action. So a plot starts first with a rising action, crisis, otherwise known as conflict, climax, and then resolution. Rising action is when you can see glitches in behavior from different characters. We can see conflict brewing up waiting to explode. Then conflict now finally explodes. That's called crisis, and that's called climax. Climax is when the conflict becomes too difficult to handle. It gets to a point of no return and it just blows up. Then when it blows up, the author has no other choice than to resolve every conflict that came up. Let's move on to the next thing. So there are 2 types of plots. There is linear or chronological, otherwise known as organic plot. So this type of plot deals with when the story begins from the very beginning and gradually moves chronologically to the end. Now, a linear plot is a plot that thickens. It starts from beginning, that's exposition, then moves to rising action, then moves to climax, and then later moves to resolution, otherwise known as denouement. The denouement is spelled DENOUEMENT. DENOUEMENT. Inorganic or episodic plot. This is a type that doesn't start from the beginning of the story. It starts from either the end or from the middle. Now, the picture that is right at our left hand side again explains what an inorganic plot is. So an inorganic plot is a plot that actually plots. The plot plots because it does not start from the beginning. It starts either from the end. If you see, some stories start from the end, some stories start from the middle. As you keep reading that, you now get to see the end, and then see the beginning as you are reading. Do you understand? So that's an inorganic plot. It does not take chronological order. It goes either from the middle to the end, then back to the beginning. But when it starts from the middle, it's called a specific name called in media res. In media res is spelled INMEDIRES. So when a prose starts from the middle, it's called in media res. Let's move on to the next thing. Point of view. Now, point of view is very important in understanding prose. Why is point of view important? Because it helps to understand the different kinds of narrative techniques. We have 3 kinds of narrative techniques. We have first person narrative technique, third person or omniscient point of view, and third person objective point of view or narrative technique. So now, what is the first person narrative technique? First person is when the story is told through the eyes of one of the characters. Go everywhere that one person goes. You don't see places where that person is not in. For example, you see example like, I was going to the market and then I saw a madman and he made a mess out of the whole place. And as I'm saying that, if the writer is writing the way I am speaking, there's no way I will automatically be in the madman's family house. Why? So that is the restriction of first person narrative technique. It is a story told through the eyes of one of the characters. So we are not anywhere that character is not. So everything we know about the story is through the lens, through the understanding, through the mindset of one person. So that's first person narrative technique. Then third person or omniscient point of view is when the writer writes as an outsider. He sees through every character and knows what is going on in the character's minds. So for example, something is omniscient. Omniscient means he sees everything, understands everything. Omniscient is one quality or one adjective that's used to describe God. When a story is being told from an omniscient point of view, the author is taking a position where he can see everything. He knows what is happening in the mind of Dayo. He knows what is happening in the mind of Shade. He knows what's happening in the mind of Bridget. He knows what's happening in the mind of Chloe. He can tell you everything that's going on in their minds through the pages of his book. That is an author writing in a third person omniscient point of view. But third person objective point of view is very different from third person omniscient because this technique excludes the writer's personal thoughts and views about a particular action, event, or character. The author is writing in third person, but he's not interpreting the thoughts of his characters through his own lens. Now, let me explain that. For example, if I'm writing a story and I'm writing, Shade saw mangoes and then she was deeply attracted to mangoes, and because of how she loved mangoes, she built a tent under mangoes, believing that her life would be full of bliss and enjoyment because she was under the shade of a mango tree. But Dayo thought she was very stupid. I would now write something like, personally, I believe that it's so stupid for Shade to have sat under the mango tree and then built a tent on that day. That's my own personal view. That's my own personal thought added to what the characters are thinking and feeling. That's me writing in maybe third person omniscient. One objective point of view, even when that objective point of view is writing in third person, the author is not writing his own perspectives or his own mindsets, his own mind construct. Character is by themselves without the influence of the author. So that's what point of view is. Let's move on to theme. A theme is a central issue of either a fictitious or non-fictitious work. It is the abstract doctrine that the text is designed to propagate into the reader's mind. The theme is the foundation that tells the major reason the story was written, the message that the writer is trying to pass across. Now, I tell people that whenever you are reading anything, whatever you take into your mind, is from somebody's thoughts. That person created it. So, and the reason that person created it is to teach something, is to pass a message across. Even funny skits and comedy is to send a message across, is to let you get something out of what you have learned. So a theme is that central issue, that central idea, the understanding that the author wants to pass across. So that's what a theme is. And a theme applies to both fictitious works and the non-fictitious works. So you don't just say, oh, themes are for only fiction and they are not for non-fiction. That's not true. So let's move on to the next theme. Types of prose. Now, many secondary school students of WAEC, preparing for WAEC literature, preparing for UTME, preparing for GCE, have issues with types of prose because it gets scattered in their brain. But no worries, I will explain it one after the other. So when a prose narrative is a short novel, it is called a novelette. When a prose narrative is a short novel, it's called a novelist. When it is a short story about an event, now this are notice the differences in everything I'm saying. When a prose narrative is a short novel, it is known as a novelette. When it is a short story about an event, it is called a novella or a novel. And the writer of a novel is known as a novelist or an author. So another kind or another type of prose is epistolary. Epistolary comes from the word epistle. So an epistolary is a novel that is written in a letter form. Now, an example was written by Miriam Barr, and this epistolary novel was written as a reply. It's called So Long a Letter by Miriam Barr. So it is a novel, but it was written in a letter form. It was a reply to her friend's letter that she got, and it was written and published as a novel. So a fable is a short story that is not founded on facts. When the fable contains a song, it is called a chant fable. This is a story with two meanings, surface meaning and deeper meaning. It mostly uses animals as its characters. Now, if you look at our left-hand side of the slide, you will see like a picture of, a lion, a hare, tortoise. They are just there. That's an example of a fable. So a fable is a short story that is not founded on facts. And then when there is a song inside those fables, they are called chant fables. And the fables never have one meaning. Fables always have a surface meaning for maybe every child that reads it, and a deeper meaning. It always has like layers and layers of meanings depending on who reads it. That's what the fable is. But they usually have a central deeper meaning. So an example of a fable is The Animal Farm by George Orwell. Move on to the next thing. A parable. A parable is telling a story according to day-to-day activities. It has a deeper meaning and teaches a moral. Now, for example, when you say parables for me are like extended or expanded proverbs in a way, because proverbs will pick up something that people do every day and then turn it into wise words. Same thing with parables. So for me, parables are like proverbs in story form. So, for example, one of the greatest parable tellers is Jesus, and Jesus in the Bible, he told parable of the lost sheep, where the shepherd left 99 sheep and went to look for the one that got lost. So at that point in time, being a shepherd was a constant thing. It was something that people do on a daily basis. It was their day-to-day activity. And then Jesus saying something like, leaving the 99 and going to look for the one, it was normal for them. I don't think they would have been dazed by it. Okay, wow, how would you leave 99 sheep for that one? Because it's what they do on a daily basis. They won't have been shocked if somebody did that. But now, with time, as time passes and people are, shepherding is like going down and down and down, like it's not as it was in his day. People now try to see the wisdom around it and all of that. You get it? So that's it. So an allegory is a piece of work with two meanings. It's different from a fable because a fable deals more with animal characters. So in the same way that an allegory can also be a fable, or there's a way I say it. I say it like this: all fables are allegories, but not all allegories are fables. All fables are allegories in the sense that a fable has two meanings, like we established before. There's a deeper meaning and there is a surface meaning. So all fables are what? Allegories, but not all allegories are fables, in the sense that an allegory can be an allegory without having animal characters. So that's what an allegory is. So if you can just put it in mind and just tell yourself, all fables are allegories, but not all allegories are fables, because allegories can have human characters, but fables must always have animal characters. So next thing is a faction. A faction is a prose genre that is a mixture of both fact and fiction. A perfect example of a faction is Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So Half of a Yellow Sun is a faction because facts on the Nigerian Civil War, the things that happened, the fact that it happened between 1967 to 1970, and all of the major facts or the minute facts are present in that novel, but there is a mixture of fiction. It's predominantly fiction, but it has facts in them. So that mixture of fiction and facts is called a faction. So the next thing is Roman à clef. Roman à clef is a novel that is built on real people and events under this guy's name. For example, I stay in Lagos State. I decided to build a novel based off on people living in my compound. All of my tenants. We have 6 tenants in my house. And if I decide to create a story about my compound, but I change the names of each of the tenants, it's a Roman à clef, because it's a novel built off of real people and events, but they have these guys' names, to a point that if you read my novel, if you read my work, you'll be like, this is the compound that this auntie spoke about, and these are the exact same character descriptions. So she must be talking about them, but with different names. That's what a Roman à clef is. A memoir is different, because a memoir is a biological sketch of somebody. So somebody decides to write a memoir about themselves. They decide, let me just write maybe about my childhood. Let me write about my high school life. Let me write about my university life. And it's a biological sketch of somebody. That's what a memoir is. So a saga novel or a Roman fleuve is a prose narrative telling the story of a family or other social group over successive generations. Example, I love this movie called Coco, Coco. So I think Coco is, or I believe somewhere that Coco is a saga novel, or a saga movie, I'm sorry, if that exists. If it was written in a novel form, it will obviously be a saga novel, because it literally traces down the succession of the generations of that family from the beginning till Coco, who is the last generation. So that's what a saga novel or Roman fleuve is. Then a picaresque. A picaresque novel is a novel tracing the adventures of a rogue or a vagabond. So, for example, like if you look to your left-hand side, you see a picture of a seeming picaresque. So a picaresque is a novel that traces the adventures of a rogue or a vagabond, somebody who is not really truly liked in society, is not really fancy, he's not the hero kind of person. Do you get? He's like a rogue, he's like a vagabond. So tracing his adventure. So for example, Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, Fieldings by Tom Jones, and the biography is the representation of the history of a person's life based on true events. So a biography is a presentation of the history of a person's life based on true events. So a biography is always written by another person about another person's life. If I decide to write a story about the history of my great grandmother, that's a biography, because I am the one writing about my great grandmother's life and she's no more. But if my great grandmother herself decides to write about her own life completely from beginning to the end, not like a memoir just snatches of your life, no, like completely from beginning to the end, that's an autobiography, because she wrote it by herself. The difference between biography and autobiography is that a biography is written by another person, by somebody else of another person's life, while an autobiography is written by the person whose story is being told when he decides to write his own story for himself. That's an autobiography. So an autobiography is non-fictitious. Of course, if you're writing about somebody's life, it's not fiction. You don't add fiction to it. So it's non-fictitious, and it is the story of one's life by the one who lived it. That is, the subject is still alive, and it is impossible to cover every aspect of the person's life. So the person will not write until he finally drops dead, or maybe at two seconds for him to breathe his last. He'll just finally write, and now I breathe my last, and then full stop and dies. So many times, greater aspect of that person's life, or the shortest aspect, maybe from the time when he finished writing to the time when he dies, there's always an aspect that is not written in autobiography. So moving on to Bildungsroman. So Bildungsroman is a German term that means novel of education. So this novel shows critical stages in the positive growth of the protagonist from childhood to maturity. So a Bildungsroman, like the picture that's on my left side, is like a coming of age story. It just is a novel of education that shows the critical stages of positive growth in the protagonist from childhood to maturity. So next thing is poetic justice. So poetic justice is not a kind of prose, it's just a term that is used to show the process of rewarding good and punishing vice in literature. Now, poetic justice it always comes at the resolution of a prose. You understand? In plot organization, it always comes at the resolution part, where good is rewarded and bad and evil is punished. So that's what is called poetic justice. So with that's all that we have for today's lesson. There are much more literary terms to talk about. Like I said before at the beginning of this lesson, that this entire topic, literary terms, is a series, and we will need like 3 more classes or 4 more classes to finally finish, if not 5. So, and I believe that we have understood everything that has been explained. If you have any questions, please put it down in the comment section. I cannot wait to hear from you, and I promise to answer all of your questions. If you have something that you don't understand, put it down in the comments, and see you in our next literature class. We're talking about the different kinds of characters. So thank you so much for staying to the end of this video. See you in our next tutorial. You can watch any of the videos on our YouTube channel that YouTube thinks is good for you to watch after you finish watching this video. Bye.